Welcome back to Awaken With Me, helping you become aware and empowered on all things health and wellness on your health and healing journey. Today, our guest is Laura Patricia Martin, a trauma specialist and lifestyle mentor, the CEO of Healing to Happy, helping women around the globe turn their pain into purpose. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into coaching.
Yeah, so I started Healing to Happy back in about 2016, 2017. I was in a domestically violent relationship. I was living in a trauma response after losing my mother and ran away to Asia. I was living in Bangkok at the time, and I was 24. And it was one of those rock bottom moments of taking radical responsibility, being like, if I stay on the road that I'm on, it has a very short expiration date. And moving out of that seems very terrible, but that's the only option I have. Like, terrifying. Like, I have no idea. So I got my butt off that floor and sat down at a coffee shop with one of my friends and told her what I was going through. And, all my friends knew what was going on, but because they were new friends, they didn't really know how to have conversations around that. Like, I had all these health issues. I had an eating disorder. I was 40 pounds underweight. I was in the relationship. I was using drugs. I was drinking. It was this whole thing. And she's like, well, you have a really interesting relationship with food. Why don't you actually go learn about it? I was like, sure, why not? So I went back, I became a health coach. I was still living in Thailand at the time. I lived there for about 6 years after this, but that didn't really help all my health issues, but people did start to see this change and they wanted to pay me. So I was like, I mean, sure, why not? Like, we can just go into this.
Yeah.
But all my health issues didn't didn't get alleviated. So I specialized in gut health and started to learn about the microbiome and this whole gut brain connection. And I had IBS, I had hormonal imbalances. I lost my period for about 5 years. It took me 6.5 to get it back. I had mysterious skin rashes they couldn't figure out. It was just this whole health mystery bubble that I had myself tied inside of. And yeah, I just started speaking about it. I started talking about it and got asked to speak on stages or in global summits and online, offline at hospitals, and just kind of steamboated from there. Like, I talk about it all the time where it's just like, I'm like a conduit of Healing to Happy. Like, it just kind of happened. And then I got super into this whole trauma because even though, I was fascinated with gut and nutrition and things like that, just at the root of all the health issues was my body was stuck in a trauma loop and I couldn't get it out no matter how much food and perfectness that I was eating in. Like, it doesn't matter if your body's stuck in fight or flight. So I got into, trauma specialist and supporting people in that way and having this whole rebirth of Healing to Happy 2.0 to help, early stage entrepreneurs convert their businesses into heart-centered businesses centered around turning their grief into gold and really having a trauma-informed way of doing this instead of the old masculine paradigm of let's create a pain and then we'll come up with the solution and this whole thing. I hate that, especially with women that are already in a vulnerable state. But yeah, I mean, the long-winded version of that, it just kind of happened with my journey and me openly sharing about the things I was going through and people wanting to know how to do the same.
Thank you for sharing that. I imagine it was a tough time to go through. In talking to some other folks, a part of the process has been the most difficult was trying to figure out what was happening. So what was that like for you? Were you going to the doctors? Were they able to help you in any way?
Yes, I
What
was
was that
going to,
journey like?
yeah. Yes, I was going to the doctors. No, they were not able to help me. It was always give me a pill, do this. And I'm a very holistic person where it's like, I don't mind taking a pill, just tell me what I'm taking it for. And I didn't like the way of them being like, well, you're here, so take this. And I was like, but you have no answers for me. Why would I take anything? That doesn't even rationally make sense.
Yeah.
So I got called difficult. I got called frustrating by many doctors. That is my very bold self there. But I just kept experimenting. I would go to doctors, I would go to naturopaths. I was studying stuff. Like I got enrolled in a bunch of programs. I got a bunch of like mentors and, nutritionists. And I just kind of became my own guinea pig because what else am I going to do? Be miserable? Like to me, I was like, I'm the best ROI for these investments. Even when I had nothing, it was like, let me jump into free master classes or let me listen to podcasts. Like, let me do these things to kind of figure it out. And over time just kept coming back to this whole nervous system dysregulation, and based on my lived experiences, kind of understanding that, well, what happened? Like I was in there for my IBS and I was all this kind of stuff with my naturopath, and her name was Penny. And I remember her looking at me and being like, I'm like crying in front of her, being like, I don't know what's wrong. Why can I help everyone else except myself? And she's like, well, do you want to talk about how your depression and anxiety are linked to all your health issues? And I was like, no. And I remember leaving and going on a candida cleanse and thinking I could out diet it because it was just the wrong time for that question. Like I didn't even know I was depressed or anxious or anything. Like I wasn't aware, even though to every outsider, they're like, you're using drugs and drinking and you have this eating disorder. Of course you're living in a trauma loop. Like, of course you're escaping things. But to me, I had been living that way since I was 13. So that to me was just that was where I was safe. That's where I was calm, where safety like lays. That was actually dysregulation to my nervous system. That's why I didn't do meditation or yoga or things like that, because it actually dysregulated me because I wasn't fit for it yet. So it was really just being this like open vessel of like, let me hear what experts have to say and let me come to it on my own timeline.
Yeah, and I think that's so important because if you're not ready, it's not going to work, right?
Exactly. No matter what, like anyone could be screaming it from the rooftops. They're like, you have to gain weight, da 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 da. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, I ate an extra banana today. What do you mean? Like, it's like it's on your own timeline, and I get it. But it is giving yourself, that's something I talk about a lot, is like, it has to be stretchy, but not stressful. Like for me to just drop into my body and be in a body that I've literally been disassociating for over a decade, like that felt terrifying. So it would be like, let me go on like shorter walks because I was going like ham on my step counter. Let me throw away my step counter. Like let me, slowly work things back in to find safety in the slowness.
Yeah.
And kind of take it from there. But yeah, it's evolution over a lifetime for sure.
Yeah, and so even though people have to come to these kind of things on their own terms, like, did you find it helpful when other people intervene? Like, did that help at all, like, throughout your process?
Depends who it was, right? If people were coming into me with like mothering energy of like, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do this, da, 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 I rejected it. I was like, I don't need you to parent me right now. But if people came in with, hey, I really care about you, what's going on? Not I have the solution, but like asking me, how am I? Like, how am I really? No fluff, no garbage. Like, how are you actually doing? That felt safer. But if someone thought they had a better solution to me, I'm like, I have that mother wound, right? Like, it's like, don't tell me what to do. Like, things like that, I was not about. And then I finally actually found my way into the 12-step program, but for Al-Anon. So it's like a support group for children and partners of addicts. So my mom died from addiction, and then my partner, that of course trauma bonding, was an addict. So found myself, it took me 3 tries to get in through that door, but found myself like wanting to surrender in that moment, being like, I am powerless over this. Like, help me figure out what's going on with my life. And that was kind of my little navigation to hearing other people's journeys, which is what inspired me to make changes. And then I started diving into like TED Talks and podcasts and feeling like no one understood me. And then all of a sudden this portal opened where I was like, wait, I'm not the only one that's been through this. Okay, I guess I'll start listening,
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you for sharing that because, it helps to make a difference to other people who might have loved ones who are facing certain things. Like, the right approach makes the big difference.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
not preaching, but really inquiring about how that person is doing.
Exactly. It's like, just ask, don't come in thinking because you're never gonna know. Even if you've been like, we can take the example for breakups. Like, people love to come in and be like, well, this is what I did. This is how what you should be doing. No, you shouldn't be texting him. No, don't. Like, it's like, just because you've been through that pain doesn't ever mean you know that person's story. And when you say things like that, it actually makes them feel like you understand them less. So if you can come in and just ask them, like, you can empathize with the feeling, right? But you don't know, like, the only person that knows what they're going through is them. So it's like when you come in and you give unsolicited advice, it's a little bit, and that's, I mean, that's everyone, but like specifically coaches who like always kind of come in, but it's like coming in and wait for that invitation where it's like, hey, or if like you have someone that's going through something and they're like ranting to you about something, like wait and just be like, do you want advice or are you just looking for a space to vent? Yeah. Before you come in and give your insight, because sometimes people don't want it, and especially when they're going through a hard time and they already feel so isolated and like people don't understand them. And then you come in and you give a story that has nothing to do with what they're feeling. It's like, it can create distance.
Yeah. I agree. So I see you talk a bit about self-sabotage and how it relates to self-protection. Can you dive a little deeper into that?
Yeah. So, what society calls self sabotage, actually, science calls self protection, right? So, giving the context of my life, I feel like we learn better in stories. From an outside perspective, people would see me using drugs and drinking and dating these shitty men and doing these kind of things. And they would be like, what is wrong with her? Why does she keep doing that stuff? Like, why doesn't she just choose a better path? But as I was explaining earlier, like my nervous system, if you sat me down to meditate, that actually caused more chaos to my body, right? Like my body is so used to the chaos and the drama and the mistrust and the lying and the deceit and the loud yelling. Like that's how I grew up. Like my household, it was okay, but then, things kind of switched when I was 16 and this whole thing unfolded with my mom. But it's like, that's what I was used to. So that's what our nervous systems are doing. So when you say like, oh, I don't like her personality, I don't like this about her, I don't like that, what you're saying is you don't like her defense mechanisms that she's built up over her lifespan to protect herself. Because all we're learning from the age before we're age of 7 is when we don't have like critical thinking yet. So we're just absorbing sponges and we can't really be like, oh, like mom didn't let me buy that toy because she's having a bad day. It's like, I'm unworthy, I'm a bad kid. And then our whole life is trying to like be a good kid, or we rebel, which is what I did. And then we wait until we're 25 and our ego is built. Like over these years until the age of 25, our ego is built. And that's to protect ourselves. We've been in school, we've been bullied, we have this heartbreak, we have that heartbreak, we have this failing grade, we have all these kind of things that have trained us to be who we are right now. And then we live that way. And so people that are, loud in school, people that are, chaotic friendships, or they drink a lot, or they have these kind of ways, that's just where their nervous system is at. And as a friend or a person of witnessing that, it's like, we're not here to judge that. And like, I'm not here to tell you what to do with your life or anything like that. But it's like, to be able to witness that gives you so much compassion for humanity, where it's just a whole bunch of traumatized 7-year-olds running around. One of my mentors said that one time. I was like, so accurate. And really, it's just understanding like this is the way that they've built up their life to protect themselves. Like you can even use that with your parents, right? Like one of the hardest relationships we have is like, why are you like this? It's like they were built that way. That's their defense mechanisms. That's how they've learned to survive their whole life. So the fact that they're living this way, it doesn't mean anything about you. It's just the way that they are leading themselves. And it's not self-sabotage. Like they will learn, hopefully, eventually, if we open a portal for them, that there are other ways that you can, regulate your nervous system and find that kind of safety from the chaos, like start to slowly move things out of there. But if we just transition people from chaos into a meditation center, that's why people go into psychosis, like when they do the vipassanas, because they can't, your nervous system isn't there yet. You have to work your way up.
An important part of our healing journey is practicing good self-care regularly. In order to do that, it's important for us to be in touch with our emotions and how we react in different situations. To help you with that, we have a free self-awareness quiz that's available on my website, awakentoyourpassion.com. You mentioned earlier about the link to between depression and anxiety and your overall health. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so polyvagal theory, right? So our entire nervous system is connected through this thing called our vagus nerve. If we are stuck in depression and anxiety, that just means we have neuroinflammation, which means our brain is inflamed. Like when we have joints that are inflamed, you can feel that. That's arthritis. When we have a throat that's inflamed, that's a sore throat. When we have anxiety and depression, it's either neuroinflammation or something somewhere isn't in alignment, whether we're future tripping on things that have happened or we are, sitting in the past, which is depression, anxiety is future tripping, or there's some type of neuroinflammation and metabolic dysregulation going on. And so when we're sitting in these cycles and they're chronic, like everyone has their days, we have bad days, we have good days, we have anxiety days. But when we're stuck in this chronically over time, our vagus nerve will then start to shut down. And our vagus nerve is responsible for everything, like giving off these anti-inflammatory compounds, controlling our functional organs. Like it's all part of our enteric nervous system. And so if that shuts down, infections arise. Like we don't have those anti-inflammatory compounds. We don't have the antibodies to kill things off. So we start to see a rise in illnesses with people that have anxiety and depression, because we're just constantly pumping cortisol through our veins and being in this elevated state of fight or flight. And so the body starts to attack itself because it thinks, oh my goodness, there's a saber-toothed tiger coming. We have to produce this to get away from that. And we have to conserve this. And all these different things start to happen. Which is why, like with my clients, when they have anxiety and depression, like that's fine. Let's talk about it. And let's actually get to the root problem of what's going on here. Like, is this a nutrition deficiency? Is this, a lifestyle thing, misalignment? Is this, being stuck in a trauma loop? Like what's actually happening here so we can actually downregulate the body and get it back to safety?
What is one of the most important steps someone can take to become healthy, if they're facing, some kind of similar struggles?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I always start people on is self-knowledge. Like take radical responsibility for where you're at and start looking at where are you at? Like what do you that one thing that you're trying to change and avoid and like shift, like what are you doing every single day that's impacting that? What do you like? What don't you like? What do you want to do differently? Right? And like really getting true on this. This is why, like, if it's nutrition, I have my clients track for a week. If it's anxiety, I have them track for a week. If it's depression, it's tracking to really look at what in your day-to-day life is impacting this. And then you can start to make changes. But if we don't know what we're doing every single day and we're just jumping into the next diet or we're just jumping into the next like 30-day challenge without actually like, where in my life do I get dysregulated, which is causing this toxic habit that I'm trying to reprogram? Like, if we're not actually looking at that, we just keep continuing things. So it's just taking radical responsibility and leadership over your life and being like, okay, for a week, I'm going to track this. I'm going to try and see where in my day do I feel dysregulated that this habit starts, right? Whether it's drinking, smoking, I don't know, over exercising, under exercising, feeling better, having arguments. Like, what is it that you're trying to shift? And this is like your one core thing that if you would change it, things would change. It's like, pay attention to that for a week. And when does that habit start to kick in? And just look at that.
And sometimes when people are trying to create um, shift in their habits, right, it's a little bit of a challenge. So how, like, what's your suggestion for keeping on course?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to switching a habit, like your nervous system is gonna want to cling to the old habit because, again, it goes back into safety. So for your whole life, our habits are all based off of our human core needs, right? Like look up Tony Robbins' 6 human needs. Our habits are created from that and they might not align with our values, but because one of these things are keeping us safe from something, your nervous system is going to cling on. It's going to be a pain in the butt to try and switch that. And that's where the self-discipline comes in, right? Like we always think we're going to be motivated. Like I'm not motivated to do half the things I want to do. It's just like, it's the self-discipline where you, again, taking radical ownership over the vision that you want to create in this life, the life that you want to lead, and going after that and being like, okay, let me cling to my why. And then if you do want to look into Tony Robbins' like 6 human needs, it's like, go look at what human need that habit is addressing? Is it your need for certainty, which is limiting your need for growth? Is it the need for connection over the need for love? Is it the need for significance? Like looking at these kind of things and being aware of what it is so that you can replace it. Because if your need for certainty, like what is that in your body? What is that giving you? Is there another thing that you can give yourself to replace that so that you can start to shift things around and actually go after your values and align them with your human needs as well? It's just, again, it goes back to ownership. Like no one can change your life for you. No one can make the habit stick. Like it's going to be uncomfortable. That's where the discipline comes in. And it's just being honest with yourself, you know?
And can you talk a little bit about the nutrition part of your work and how that benefits your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do too much of the nutrition stuff anymore because we have taken a pivot from that, but it's taking care of your human basic needs, right? Like if you're going to create these big visions in life and you're going to go after things in your life, like you have to be eating right, you have to be sleeping right, you have to have a community, you have to be getting daily sunlight. Like there's got to be daily rituals that are the foundations of your life that come before any of the other things, because if you don't have your health, you have nothing, right? Like we have seen that because of the current pandemic that we're in, right? Like we need to be taking care of ourselves before any of the other context comes into play. And then we can start to pay attention to that, especially if you're an entrepreneur, especially if you're a mom, especially if you're, you know, these women that are doing big things in the world. Like you need a balanced blood sugar level to get you through the day, and like no skipping meals, no running on coffee, no like deeming things as bad and carbs as bad. It's like we have to understand how our body works and how she needs to be fueled so that we can access this like higher thinking mind and really go after these things that we want, you know? Like for me, my certifications, like that was a means of healing myself. Like I had a disordered relationship with food, so I wanted to go learn about it so I wasn't afraid of it. And then I learned too much of it and I became orthorexic and obsessed with it. And then I had to unlearn it. Like it's always a process, but at the end of the day, once you heal yourself, the war you have against your body, you're going to forget that that was even a part of your story. Like I don't think about my body anymore. I don't like working out and things. Like I've never been more in love with my body, but it's I have other things to do than worry about, you know, is there's carbs in this? What kind of fats? What kind of like all the things we used to obsess about and like calories and things like that. It's like really when you get to a space of your healing, it just becomes not that it's not important. It's the most important. Your health is the most important thing, but the fight against the body is not important. Like it doesn't matter. It just becomes natural.
Yeah, and I think that makes so much sense because it is all in the subconscious, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're taking better care of yourself, and you don't need to put it so much in the forefront anymore. Um, so now we're coming to a close. Is there anything, a final thought that you want to share?
I mean, the thing I always say is like you can't be at war with your body and win. Like we think we can outsource all this stuff. Like let me buy this supplement, let me buy this, let me do that, and we go from a space of like lack where it's like buy things that amplify what you already are, right? That make you feel good. Pay attention to those things and really set yourself free. Like nothing can fix you except yourself. And we spend so much time and money and resources and all these kind of things thinking like, oh my God, this is going to fix me, as opposed to addressing things of like, how can this make me more of who I already am? And from there, going after the things that we want and showing up in the way that we want for the people that we love, the friendships that we had, the communities that we built. But if we're fighting against our body, it's just, we're never going to win that one, you know? So that would be my closing thing. And if anyone wants to come hang out or anything like that, just come over on Instagram and hang out. Things like that.
Yeah, sure. So how can they reach you? Like, what's your social media?
Yeah. So my personal one is it's Laura Patricia Martin. So at ITS Laura Patricia Martin. And then our company one is Healing to Happy. So Healing TO Happy. And then I also have a podcast, Healing to Happy. So you guys can just wherever you feel like tuning in, you'll probably get a cutie little voice note from me or my team being like, we're so happy that you're here. But yeah, you'll figure out what programs, what master classes, anything like that that we have going on from either one of our pages.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being with us today. It was nice having you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for having me.
So today's learning outcome is that we know ourselves better than anyone else. And while our actions might not fit those of what's acceptable in society, we use different ways of protecting ourselves, which is okay. People also come to terms with different parts of their lives and the things they're struggling with in different ways and in different timing. So while it's okay to be there for someone, be there in a loving way while giving the necessary space. Thanks for joining us on today's podcast. If you haven't yet done so, hit the subscribe button for new content every 2 weeks. And be sure to visit my website, awakentoyourpassion.com, for more resources. Until next time, take care.